what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Rules of Engagement. As always, I'll be your host, Nick axslav ranish, and this show is about analyzing tactics and strategies used in Starcraft 2 from a professional level, also looking at tactics you can use at home to improve your play to beat your buddies or get that extra level on the ladder. Now let's talk about the topics of the day. Of course, today is going to be a special day. We just got off of MLG Dallas. Of course, that's why we had to break in Rules of Engagement. But going forward, we're going to be going to you guys every single day of the week here on Rules of Engagement today at 7 Eastern right now. In the future, it'll be playing right after some content, probably about 6 to 6:30 Eastern. But today we have Flash vs. Innovation Game 2 from the semifinals of Major League Gaming Dallas, the Winter Championship Tournament. First, we're going to talk about how you can play mech versus bio. Then we're going to talk about how you can play bio versus mech and some key things to look at while you're playing that style, of course, in Terran vs. Terran. And then we're going to talk about the positional game in Terran vs. Terran and some very important things to look at when you're trying to decide where to position your forces and how to basically get the most benefit as possible with your units positionally. Then, of course, at the end of the show is going to be the series overview and the viewer Q&A. Now, normally Rules of Engagement, we look at several different maps, but here, this game was so amazing. If you missed it, check out the VOD. You can get it at YouTube, youtube.com/official MLGSC2. Every single game from Dallas is there on our YouTube channel, so go check it out there. But this game was absolutely amazing. I really want to break down analysis, so we're going to spend a full episode just on this game. But let's get into our first section, which is going to be about how to play mech versus bio. So we're going to talk about heavy Hellion opening. And this is something that, you know, a lot of players, when they jump into, they don't quite think of. But we'll talk about how heavy Hellion, you go just a ton of Hellions early on, how that can be useful to open up your mech play. Then we'll take about how to take a fourth base. That's a very hard thing to do when you're playing an immobile style, so that's very important to talk about the steps you need to go when you want to take that fourth base. Then we'll talk about investment decisions. So as you progress up, how to allocate your resources, and most specifically, that gas. So let's jump into the replay. And we're going to talk about how to open with heavy Hellions in mech play. So one thing I want to start talking about is if we look at Flash over here, right? He's the guy playing mech. What we notice is that first he's doing a standard reactor Hellion opening. Now, of course, Innovation is going to be going this direction as well because reactoring out Hellions after your expansion is just a very solid way to play TVT for a couple of reasons. One, you get the reactor Marines out early, and those will help you repel Reaper harass. Of course, Hellion harass, deal with a Banshee if you don't quite have a Viking out yet. And then the Hellions, they can scout. Actually, Innovation's not doing this, but he's using Hellions, he can scout. If he sees air play or drop play, he can add in some Widow Mines to supplement, of course. You can see he already has a Viking out here getting ready to stop that drop play. In fact, here's a drop coming right now. He can use the Viking to stop that without too much of a problem. And then, of course, the Hellions are going to guard the front. And, of course, he has some Marines here as well to help defend that drop. Now, as we go forward, one thing that's interesting is look at his gas, right? So from a Terran player going mech, he's still only on 2 gas at the 8-minute mark. A lot of people go crazy and get this 3rd and 4th gas really fast. But if you build only Hellions, right, you can see double factories, going to move this one over to Tech Lab, start that Blue Flame research to get basically more Hellions out. And the important thing here is that if you're getting only Hellions, that spends only minerals. So you can go ahead, you can get the Raven, you can get some Vikings, and spend a little bit of gas on that, a little bit more gas on the 2nd factory, the Blue Flame, but you don't need the 3rd and 4th gas. In fact, what you can do is you can even invest in that 3rd expansion. He should be building that right about soon as his money's getting higher. You can go ahead and get your 3rd command center before you even need to invest in that 3rd and 4th gas. So what this allows you to do is we can pause it right here. Still only 2 gas. Whereas the player going bio, you can see he's going bio because he's putting all these extra barracks. The player going bio is adding more gas than a player going mech. Now it's crazy. You're like, wait a minute, but how can you work with just Hellions when the real mech units are the siege tanks? Well, as units scale up, it's true you're going to need siege tanks. But the things to consider about a Hellion are how much you can produce early in the game, right? Hellions you can build off the reactor. You can build them off the reactor factory. And they only take 30 seconds to build, which means with the reactor, you can go ahead and build 2 Hellions, right? And now 2 Hellions every 30 seconds means very early in the game you can get that food advantage. You can see our Flash already at 105 food to Innovation's only 87. And that's because he's opening very heavy into Hellions, right? So you'll have a dominant early game army. What that means is you can take your 3rd base before your opponent. Sure, he has his 3rd base here, but you can see here as soon as Innovation tries to move that 3rd base, we'll just fast forward just a little bit. As soon as he tries to move it out here, Flash can easily shut this down with that superior Hellion army. And if this army tries to go out and meet it, he's going to be in for a tough problem, because if the tanks are in siege mode, they can defend. But trying to spread out to that third base, the Marine have the opening that pretty much every bio army is going to have. They're going to get absolutely destroyed by these Blue Flame Hellions. We can see here, they just absolutely destroy the Marines. Have to watch out for the tanks, and maybe got a little bit too close. They can easily shut down his third base. Meanwhile, his third base is already set up. It should be turning into an orbital momentarily, and of course he can get those fifth and sixth gases, faster than his opponent, even though his third and fourth were later. But he's got the map control, and that allows him safety, right? His opponent can't drop, because if he sent the Marines to drop, then the tanks would be vulnerable. His opponent can't take a third base quite yet, because he's got to build up a little more units. So it's kind of a little bit of a change of roles here. Normally the bio players don't want the map control. If you open heavy Hellions, their tank count's going to be a little bit slower to kick off, right? But you're going to have the map control early game. Now, unfortunately, this attack doesn't go so well here. But you're going to have the map control early game. That's because if you stop here and actually rewind it just a minute or so, what we can see is that the bio player is investing in, look at this. They're always going to get early upgrades, because bio needs those upgrades to compete. So they're investing in upgrades, and even if they weren't getting the engineering B upgrades, he's still going to invest in combat shields. He's still going to invest in stim pack. All this expenditure means that if you just go Hellions, you can cross the map fast, and you can have that map control because you're not making the same investments, which means even as a mech player, you can get your third base up faster. And of course, getting that third base up faster is very important, because that's your fifth and sixth gases. So going forward, now we said, okay, we're going to have the third base up, 5, 6 gases for Flash. Now we know he's adding more factories. He's getting his siege tank count up, because he needs an army that can compete with the bio army once it gets stim, combat shields, and medevac support. Then the Hellions can't quite cut it. They need a siege tank. So by then he's got all his 3 factories cranking out siege tanks. Now what's the next question? How to take that fourth base. So the hardest part about taking the fourth base isn't, oh, will I have enough units to beat his army? We can see here at the army tab, Flash has definitely a small or significant unit advantage, and that's because, partly because he's Flash and his macro is absolutely insane. But it's also just because there's no reason you should have less, right? Unless something really bad goes early, you should be able to keep roughly equivalent army size with your opponent. And mech is fine in a straight-up engagement as long as your tanks are pre-siege. So it's not about defending, their major push. The 400 minerals in this command center aren't going to make your army that much more. A few less Hellions isn't going to make or break in a straight-on head-up engagement. The hard part is, as we go forward here, as soon as he moves this command center up here, right, what's going to happen is that as soon as he moves it up here, he's going to have to defend from drops from multiple locations. So, in fact, if we actually bring up maybe the map here real quick, we can talk about a couple of things he's got to worry about as he takes that fourth base. So Flash over here is in the bottom left, right? Right now he's got one base right here. One base here is main base. He's got a third base. And all 3 of these bases, you can see, he can pretty much defend these 3 bases just with an army in a central location. It's pretty close. Get between all 3. He can defend them pretty well. But as soon as he tries to take a fourth base, this is the closest fourth base. That's a terrible drawing. Out of practice a bit, guys. Sorry. As we get going daily content, we'll get in the swing of things again. But as he goes and takes his fourth base, right? This is the closest one, easiest to defend. Now all of a sudden, what's going to happen, right? His army, he may have to position it something like right here, right? If his army is right here, all of a sudden, let's say we'll say green is the bad guy innovation. Well, we're talking this from the mech point of view for this section. So he can all of a sudden send units in here, drop play. He can send medevacs because the army's here and not here, right? If the army moves up a bit here to defend, all of a sudden the medevacs can go straight through here, hit the main, and of course along the back line, right? And from Flash's point of view, his army now has a further distance to go to get all the way into main or all the way over here. It's got to cover all these directions, all these little tentacles. Much harder to cover all these bases trying to take that fourth base. So, what does Flash do? What he does is he sets up defenses to narrow down those options. Let's jump over back into the game and see exactly what he does. We can jump back here. What does he do? Well, the medevac's coming in to drop in the main. What does he have? He has missile turrets. So as soon as his army mobilizes and pushes up here, right, he no longer has the Vikings to defend his section, but he's got the missile turrets, so the drop can't go into main. What does he have down here? He's going to have missile turrets down here too, so a drop can't come in across the bottom. ground units can go across the bottom, but his barracks will see ground troops going along this passageway, which of course is the only passageway that can go here. Of course, drops along the left side. What does he have? He's got 2 missile turrets here. So when he goes to that 4th base, he invests in all the stack defense. Now, if you look back a few minutes, what's really important here is that he didn't have these things here earlier because he wanted to bump up his army, right? He wanted to get all his buildings producing, you know, get the second armory going, get more factories, all his money he wanted to be investing in this stuff, and then, of course, starting at 4th base. And now, once he thinks about maybe moving out there, as we go forward, we can see he's going to start to go ahead and build those structures momentarily. There's 2 missile turrets over here. There's 2 over here. There's 2 down here. And this is all because he's like, okay, I now need to move out and take this 4th base, so I need to make sure my army won't be here to defend all the drop play. It won't be as close to these bases. I've got to get that stack defense going forward. So when you take that 4th base, make sure your drop defenses and your scouting, notice the barracks here and the one helling here, are very solid so you can't get taken unaware as you try to kind of sprawl out and take over a larger and larger section of the map. The last thing we're going to talk about when it's very important in playing mech versus bio going forward here is your investment decisions, okay? So right here as we can get approach here, of course he's got to worry about this attack here. He's taking his 4th base, and this is the point. Up until now, the investment decisions have been pretty straightforward, right? Well, actually going to bring up this structure tab. So pretty straightforward, all his decisions, right? Go Hellions, get map control. Behind a map control, go to 3rd base so I can get 6 gases running fast. Use those 6 gases to go up to 5 factories very quickly. And then I get an army, and I can use the army to take my 4th base. Going forward, here's the question. Now, I'm not quite on 8 gases yet. I'm only on 6. So there's a couple things they want to do. 1, I'm only on 5 factories. If, you know, battles start happening, I start losing tanks, I need to replace them, I want to have more factories so I can reproduce my tanks. Factories cost gas. Tech labs cost gas. Reactors cost gas. That all costs gas. What else? I want to get a second army and crank out double upgrades. That's another big gas investiture. What else might one you do? Well, he may want to get some key upgrades here. If you look at the upgrade tab, I think it's U, right, or G. It's one of these upgrades. G. But you can see right now, Flash only has pre-igniter, right? That's the only upgrade he has right now. He might want to get that one that turns Hellions into Hellbats mode so you can switch him from Hellbat mode to Hellion mode and vice versa. I think it's called service engines or something like that. But he might want to get level 2 weapons, you know, the army upgrades. He might even want to go to airplay. There's all these transitions you want to go investing gas into. But right now he's only on 6 gas. He can't get them all, right? And so you'll talk to some people. They'll say, oh, you always want to get more factories first. You always want to get upgrades first. You're always going to make sure your Hellions can transform at will between modes first. There's a lot of different upgrades. And it's important not to know a general order like, oh, I should just always get this one first. It's important to know the purpose of each upgrade and the way it'll play out as the game goes on so that you can understand, given your investment decisions, what you should be looking for as your strengths as the game goes on and what you should be worried about that you didn't invest in the area so it could be a weakness, right? So if we can see here, let's jump back to Flash's viewpoint. At this point in the game, what's he investing in, right? So he's investing in 2 command centers is one thing, 2 additional ones. He's going up to 6 orbital commands. They're actually, probably this will be a PF, so yeah, 5 in a PF. He's invested in a second armory, double upgrades, and, right, he's investing in transformation servos. I was pretty close in guessing that. So he's investing basically, if you think about this, right, he's spending all his gas. This is all his gas, right? He has nothing left. In double armory upgrades, transformation servos, and more command centers. So what he skipped out of all these investments, well, besides air tech, but that's something you probably would do later in the game anyway. The main thing he skipped is additional factories, okay? And that was a choice he made, right? It wasn't a wrong choice, but it's a choice. So understanding that, saying, okay, I'm investing in upgrades, transformation servos, and command centers. That means I can be more cost-efficient in my battles because I can always have Hellions in Hellbat mode to tank with me, and then it can move around to defend drops, but transform into Hellion mode for mobility. As the game goes on, looking at it maybe 5 minutes from now, I'll have great upgrades. So 5 minutes from now, I'll be in good shape. 2 extra command centers, 5 minutes from now, I'll be in good shape. But what's the weakness? Well, because I'm only on 5 factories, yes, I'm maxed out, or he's at 190 right now. He'll be maxed out momentarily if he's not. He's pretty much maxed out, but once blows start happening, once you start trading armies, I'll have a much harder time remaxing because even with a lot of economy, I've only got 3 tech lab factories and 2 reactor factories. I can only make Hellions 4 at a time, which is one of your good reinforcements to help buffer. Only making Hellions 4 at a time in the late game means you got to be a little bit careful about going crazy with army trades. So it's important to understand those and saying if you're Flash now making disinvestment decisions, maybe I should just play passively and try to avoid all confrontations. Because if there's army trades going on, I might not be able to replenish my forces as fast as he can, and then I can start losing bases because I still have to wait for reinforcements to hit where I need them to hit. So going forward, that's important to understand those investment decisions, right? So Flash, knowing that he's just going to stay in defensive mode and just pretty much buckle up and defend from here on out. Now, we're actually going to stop us here. We can see he can defend because we're at a point where the game gets pretty, it gets into a new zone where really Flash is pretty much set, but it's going to come into positioning and late game decisions, and we'll save that for another segment. But right now, we'll take a short break and be right back with the next segment, which is going to be looking at how to open and play the early and mid game, playing the bio side in a bio versus mech TVT matchup. See you guys in a minute.